Hey, everyone. Thanks for hanging out. First in pod, you know the drill. Danny Parkins, Andrew Fillipponi. I mean, honestly, we should be getting paid overtime for sticking to the every team, every week mantra when there are no games in the offseason. But that's why we're your favorite NFL podcast. Subscribe, rate, review, give us 5 stars, text a friend about it, tell a friend. What's up, Pony?
Danny, I think this is one of the best gimmicks we've come up with for the offseason. I really like this one. We're going to do who is the favorite to win an award on each team. So that could be MVP.
Most likely person from each team to win an award at the end of the year.
Yep. Coach, offensive player of the year, defensive player, rookie, comeback, MVP, you name it. And this was your idea. Actually, it was a combination of you and Spencer. So you put your two heads together, and I like this one.
Listen, you know me. I'm not one to take much credit for things. We'll give Spencer Ray, our executive producer here. So I got NFC, you have AFC, like normal. We'll go back and forth. Would you like the honors, sir?
I can do that if you'd like, sure.
You know, because I actually thought as I was going through this, I was like, the AFC for comeback player of the year and MVP, you have those awards kind of dominated. I don't have a lot of great candidates for those awards in mind. I've got some other good ones, but anyway, so yeah, pick a team and start us off.
I'm going to start with the Super Bowl favorite. That's the Kansas City Chiefs. And the individual most likely to win an award on Kansas City in 2024 is Andy Reid. I'm going to go Andy Reid for Coach of the Year, and here's why I'm going to do that. I have said on this podcast that I think there's a chance the Chiefs have a 2007-like season. And I know if that 2007 Patriots-like season. And I know if that happens, you can come at me here and the rebuttal is, well, then why aren't you making Patrick Mahomes the favorite to win the MVP? And that's fair. I could have easily done that too. Reid has not won Coach of the Year since, I believe, 2002. I don't think he's ever won the Coach of the Year as Chiefs coach. Part of the problem is when the expectations are high and you merely meet those expectations, it's like you get rejected or you get excluded from the Coach of the Year conversation. It's turned into who did the most with the least. But I do think there's exceptions where when a guy is a coach of this quality, who we acknowledge now as the best coach in the NFL, and it's been such a long time since he's gotten individual acknowledgement and recognition. If they have like a 14-3 record, Danny, and I think it's possible if they do this year, I could see Andy Reid capturing the AFC the NFL Coach of the Year.
Listen, I love you. You're one of my best friends. You have contrarian takes. This is just not the correct answer. Like, Andy Reid is the longest shot of any coach in the NFL to win Coach of the Year. He's 60-1.
And I will be making that bet.
Okay, because Patrick Mahomes is 5-1 to win MVP. And the exercise was who is most likely to win an award. Andy Reid is not more likely to be Coach of the Year than
Well, then why don't we just read off the list of what the odds makers have for every team, and that's how we'll answer every question, and we'll see if we can get a big sports book to come in and sponsor this podcast episode, if that's how you just want to do this.
I'm just saying, you went from 5-1 to 60-1, and you said the 60-1 was more likely. It's one thing if it's a little close. It's not more likely that Andy Reid wins Coach of the Year. But regardless, all right, I'll go NFC East. I will go with the Dallas Cowboys because I think the debate here is Dak Prescott MVP or Micah Parsons for Defensive Player of the Year. I don't know if we're counting like season leader for rushing yards, like rushing title.
That's not an award.
Or receiving title. Fair enough. Because CeeDee Lamb, I think, is a great bet for that, just on sheer volume of targets. But I said Micah Parsons for Defensive Player of the Year. I don't think Dak is likely, like, runner-up for MVP, even if he has another very good statistical year. I don't think that he is looked at as the caliber of player as in terms of like an actual individual talent, even though I think he's clearly a top 10 quarterback in the NFL. I think the highest he'll ever finish is last year where he was the runner-up. Whereas Micah Parsons, he's, a Pro Football Focus darling. He can do everything. He, rushes the passer. He drops into coverage. He's gotten much better against the run. He fills up the stat sheet. 20 sacks is in play. 5 forced fumbles, 5 interceptions is in play. He's one of the best defensive players in football. So I'll say Micah Parsons for the Cowboys.
And this has turned into a Pro Football Focus award now, as we saw last year with Myles Garrett winning it over TJ Watt, who was better than him in every traditional defensive individual category. So that's fine. I like Parsons a lot. You know that. Baltimore Ravens next for me. Who is most likely on this team to win an individual award? I'm going to piss you off again. I'm not going to say Lamar Jackson here. I'm going to say Kyle Hamilton for Defensive Player of the Year. They lost Patrick Queen. I know Roquan.
He's excellent. He's an excellent player.
Well, the thing about it is with this, he has the ability to affect the game in so many different ways. So I know I just made the argument but piggybacked on what you said regarding how some of this is now analytics based, but he has the opportunity with interceptions and sacks and coming down to the line of scrimmage and flying all around the field where he can be in the backfield. He can play center field. So as hard as it is for me to say this about a Notre Dame guy, he has actually exceeded the expectations, which very few Golden Domers do in the NFL. And I do look at him as right now, he is on the cusp of being a top 5 defensive player in the league. I have him rated, I think, between 5 and 10. And I would actually make him, for me, he is the best secondary player in the NFL, in my opinion, right now, Kyle Hamilton.
Tough for him to have a better analytical year than he did last year, where he didn't allow a single touchdown to a tight end. But if he does have some more of the counting stats this year, I do think that, he's an excellent football player. Kelsey got him in the playoffs, but that regular season was pretty ridiculous. I do it more. I organize by division. You go by kind of power rank for teams. We never adjust to each other. That's fine. I will go Philly. I considered Hurts MVP, but I just don't really believe it. I considered Saquon Offensive Player of the Year, but I just don't really believe it. I think that those two guys will both diminish each other's rushing production this year. There were so few highly drafted defensive players, and such a huge story last year was the Philly secondary. Quinion Mitchell, defensive rookie of the year. He's the type of guy that if he does get the ball in his hand on a few picks, he's one of the fastest players in football. If he has a couple of pick sixes, we know they play a ton of nationally televised games. There are not a ton of great candidates for defensive rookie of the year this year. So I actually think he's a little bit more likely to take home the hardware than some of the more high-profile and well-known veterans on the team.
Well, yes, that's because they didn't get drafted until the middle of the first round. So that's why the candidate pool
that's what I'm saying.
is much shallower. I hear you on that. Marcus Peters won it by getting turnovers. I think Sauce Gardner did it more by shutting people down. So they have shown with this award that there's not just one thing they look at in cornerback play and say, you have to have 6 interceptions or whatever to be eligible for this award. If he just locks people down, he can do that. And they brought in one of the great defensive minds in the NFL, Vic Fangio, this year. So maybe he will hit the ground running right off the bat. I don't mind that pick, Danny. The Bengals. So vacillated on this one. I really thought long and hard about where I wanted to go with this. It became obvious to me, and this is why, this award now, they've tried to define it better because of what happened last year with Damar Hamlin versus Joe Flacco. Now they want it to be more about injuries and not just a guy sucking or not playing and performing better the following season. So I'm not going to make the case for Russell Wilson to be comeback player of the year with the Steelers based on the new criteria. I think it applies to Burrow, though. I think he missed enough time last year where if he has better numbers at the end of the season than Aaron Rodgers and the Bengals finish in first place, which I think they will, he will become the NFL comeback player of the year. I see it as a 2-horse race between him and Aaron Rodgers, and the team that wins more games and the guy that probably throws more touchdowns, the tiebreaker being the better record, will win that award. So Joe B.
Yeah, I mean that's what I would have picked for that. I mean, the question was, is Burrow more likely to win comeback player of the year or MVP? And I think because of the difficulty of the division, comeback player of the year is more likely. But if he comes all the way back to, 4,500 yards, 35 touchdowns, he'll also be in the MVP conversation. And maybe if he finishes second or third for that, they'd give him the consolation comeback player of the year award. So I absolutely like the pick. For Washington, I think this one's pretty obvious. Jaden Daniels, Offensive Rookie of the Year. I don't think he will win it, but we're doing team and a player most likely to win the award. He's got good skill position guys on offense, and we know that he's going to run the ball. So he'll be a fantasy football darling in terms of production this year. That should give him a fairly high floor, assuming that he stays healthy. I wasn't the biggest fan of his, but I don't see a defensive player of the year candidate on the team. I don't see an MVP candidate on the team. I don't see an offensive player of the year candidate on the team. So I think Jaden Daniels is the obvious choice for the Commanders, even though I think he's obviously a deserving second favorite to my guy, Caleb Williams.
Bills. Okay, I'm not going to name Josh Allen MVP because to win MVP, you usually have to have one of the 2 or 3 best records in the NFL. I don't see the Bills winning 13 games or something like that this year. I think they're in the mix to win the division with the Jets, obviously, to a lesser extent the Dolphins. But given the offseason tumult there, I'm not going to bank on them to be one of the 5 best teams in the NFL this year. Josh Allen, okay, Offensive Player of the Year is becoming more of a wide receiver running back award than it is quarterback. They're not giving that to quarterbacks like they did back in the day with Drew Brees anymore, okay? So I'm crossing him off the list. You just went Offensive Rookie of the Year. I'm going to throw Keon Coleman's name in here, okay? I'm not making him my odds-on favorite to win it, but where do the footballs go in that offense? If we're talking for Josh Allen, 35 touchdowns and 4,500 to 4,800 yards, who's catching all those balls, Danny? Dalton Kincaid, the running back? Keon Coleman.
I didn't know if that was an open-ended question. Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to look up what it actually is for him because I saw him listed, but it's he's below Xavier Worthy, but he's in front of Ladd McConkey. He is 26.
He's below Ladd McConkey?
No, I'm sorry, above Ladd McConkey, below Xavier Worthy in terms of receivers. Keon Coleman is 26-1 for Offensive Rookie of the Year. Caleb, Jaden, Marvin, Malik, JJ, Xavier, Bo, Drake, and then Keon Coleman. I'm on a first-name basis with all the rookies. Malik Neighbors for the New York Giants. Similar logic, right? We think he's a star. They'll have some sort of passing production. Where else are they going to go with the football? He also has, New York media behind him, the Odell Beckham comparisons. And
the New York media would be behind any of the candidates for any of their awards. So it's not like Malik Neighbors gets that for an award and Daniel Jones would not, or Brian Dable would not for an award, right?
But he has the most. I actually disagree with that.
You do?
They have because they have a clean slate with Neighbors. There's baggage with Dable. There's baggage with Daniel Jones. Like some people would, even if he has a good year, you know how it is. People want to hold on to their takes.
How about Burns on defense?
Burns, that was the other one.
Does he get a New York bump?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. And Burns and Neighbors were the 2 that I considered. I did not consider Dable or Daniel Jones for these things. But listen, I think Neighbors is spectacular. If he keeps his head on straight, and I think he's got the ability to have a lot of 70-yard touchdowns with his yards after the catch. So if Daniel Jones can hit him on a 12-yard slant, I think he can have a pretty special rookie season. So I went Neighbors over Burns, but Burns, I did consider him.
When what happened with Dable, congratulations on all that lost weight. His wife looks like a different human being in the before and after pictures that were posted. I don't know if you saw that. Is this another?
Did see it.
Is this another Ozempic miracle?
You know what? I'll do the Jim Rome allegedly, but that seems like a safe bet based on what's going on in Hollywood right now and all of these transformations. So yeah, people of means.
Should I do it?
What?
Should I do it?
You have a personal trainer and are in fantastic shape.
I do have a personal trainer. I did burpees this morning. I threw up in my mouth and swallowed it because I didn't want to pull a Hunter Green. So yeah, that was bad. Speaking of,
how many burpees can you do?
Well, it was 60 seconds, as many as you could do in 60 seconds. I did 12.
That's very impressive.
Thank you.
You're a specimen, dude.
How many do you think you could do?
4.
Okay. I think you're underselling yourself there. Houston Texans. We bet CJ Stroud to win the MVP last year.
Yes, we did.
I'm going to bet on him to do it again. I really believe
10-1.
I really believe this. There are 3 guys right now, actually 4. If I were to say to you, you have to buy stock in professional athletes who will have the next 10 years, who are going to be the best athletes in professional sports. You're grabbing 10. Well, if I make it 10, you'll probably say Mahomes. So if I make it like 12 to 15. Okay, so now with Mahomes, we're pushing to into his 40s, right? He's got to be close to 30.
Yeah, he's
now.
29.
Okay,
29.
He's not going to play till he's 45, we don't think. I think Stroud, Victor Wembanyama, Connor Bedard, and Paul Skeens would be my list. Across all
it would be ridiculous to pick a pitcher. And I know you love Skeens and you've got the Pittsburgh.
Why? Because you're friends with Jeff Passan and he wrote a book about arm problems. Is that why? He's built like
I have read the
Secretariat.
book. I am friends with him, but I also watch baseball.
Yeah.
And
well, you're scarred by Mark Pryor and Kerry Wood, so it would make sense for you to say those things.
What about Steven Strasburg?
Oh, he had horrible mechanics.
Dude, throwing a baseball that hard with that much velocity is not healthy, no matter the mechanics. That has been proven.
All right, Dr. Job. Okay, I get it.
I'm just saying, maybe he's a freak of nature and he's Justin Verlander, but that's not because Verlander has great mechanics. It appears to be luck. So maybe Skeens never blows out. Maybe he does, but for 15 years, you want to bet on a starting pitcher if you could pick 4 athletes in any sport? No, thank you.
So then who would you so you think I should not have, how about Stroud? Do you want to call that into question too?
Well, it is an NFL podcast. No, I mean, listen, I think Stroud is spectacular. I do think that we are.
Would you put Stroud ahead of if you could have one guy for the next 15 years, remove your Chicago bias and who they draft?
No, listen, I think Stroud
or Caleb.
Stroud is the safer bet than Caleb because we've seen him do it in the NFL. I do think, though, that when I hear things like that we're going just a step too far on it. I do his debut performance was spectacular, but it was not Mahomes' debut performance. Now, Mahomes' was in year 2 instead of year 1, but it was year 1 of a starter. He had 5,000 yards and 50 touchdowns.
No doubt, but it was
CJ Stroud had 23 touchdowns?
Yes, but it was unprecedented in this regard. The way he took care of the football, we've never seen that from a rookie quarterback before.
I know that, but turnover variance. You want to make a bet? You think that he's a 5 interception guy every year for his career?
No, not every year for his career.
Very unlikely.
No, not every year for his career. But you just said that you would take Stroud over Caleb Williams, which means that you do.
But I would take both of them. You know what I mean? I think if you're Wembanyama and Bedard are obvious superstar picks. I think those guys are locks. I probably would take Mahomes just because of the sheer volume of I got him for another 10 years and I'm pretty sure his next decade is going to be spectacular. And then Stroud would get a very, very slight edge over Caleb. But all right, you brought me to the NFC North. Should I just Caleb Williams, Rookie of the Year?
Sure.
Nothing else needs to be said.
Yep, that's like John Elway for the Hall of Fame. You say his name, you sit back down.
Yeah, Caleb Williams, Rookie of the Year, feels pretty good here.
Jets for me. The easy thing to do is say Aaron Rodgers for comeback player of the year. Just because there's such a small group of people that are actually eligible for that award. But I don't like taking shortcuts and I don't like taking the easy way out. But again, I have to be honest and completely authentic with the listeners of this podcast and the viewers of it. That is how I feel for the Jets on this one. I have to say Rodgers for comeback player of the year. I'd like to maybe try to make an argument for Sauce Gardner or Garrett Wilson for offensive player or something like that. But no, I'm going to go with Aaron Rodgers for comeback. But there is a bias against him now. Maybe that factors into this. It's a narrative-based award, and he's made a lot of enemies.
Yeah, it is. It is the only. I mean, listen, Quinnen Williams is great. Sauce Gardner is great. I'm going to have Breece Hall again in my rushing yardage draft with you, but you said that we can't do lead the league in rushing for like rushing title as for this pod. But Rodgers comeback player of the year is the correct choice. All right, I'm going to give you one that is disgusting.
Jordan Love MVP.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was thinking about it. Like Matt LaFleur for coach of the year is definitely possible. But if Matt LaFleur is in there for coach of the year, Jordan Love had a monster season. And Jordan Love has every narrative piece that MVP voters love. There's no Jordan Love fatigue, carries over the momentum from last year, iconic franchise, no other superstar on offense, to say, well, for Tua, it's more Tyreek Hill, or for Dak Prescott, it's more CeeDee Lamb, or there's no one on the Packers offense that will deflect any credit from Jordan Love. And if he plays a full season like he played the last half of last season, he absolutely will be a top 3 MVP finisher this year. So you said you threw up in your mouth from burpees. I'm throwing up in my mouth from saying this, but it is the most likely Packer to win a postseason award.
Dolphins, I got to go with Tyreek Hill for offensive player of the year because of what you just said. Tua can have a great year, and I don't think they'd give him the credit for it unless it was so off the charts. The Dolphins end up winning the AFC East, and the Dolphins challenge the Chiefs or the Texans or somebody like that for the overall number 1 seed. And they were kind of doing that last year, and I still think that people were gun shy to give Tua any flowers. So it's Tyreek Hill. And I don't really know if there's anybody else I'd want to sit here and try to sell you on for an individual award on their team.
I think that's right. Detroit Lions. There are a lot of ways you could go with this one. There are a ton of ways you can go. Sorry, I'm DVRing this presidential debate, and it just started playing for some reason, so I had to
you don't want to maybe cue it. You don't want to bring it on right now?
No, I don't. I'm sure it will just be staggering incompetence of all levels and mortifying realities to the situation that we find ourselves in.
There's an optimistic outlook on things.
Hey, man, you want to do that pod at some point? I'm down. I think there's an argument for Aiden Hutchinson. I think there's an argument for Patricia. But I think Amon-Ra St. Brown for offensive player of the year. Dan Campbell. I said Patricia. Dan Campbell, excuse me.
Matt Patricia. Holy cow, you are...
I'm distracted.
You are rattled by things right now.
I got to turn this off. I'm sorry. Dan Campbell. I'm sorry. I think it was crazy that they didn't do anything to add to depth to their receiver core this offseason. And we know Laporta gets targets and we know Gibbs gets targets. But there's a scenario where Amon-Ra St. Brown gets like 150 plus targets. Last year, CeeDee Lamb was over 180. If Amon-Ra St. Brown gets 150 or more targets this year, that guy can have he could flirt with Calvin Johnson's record, which is going to fall in the next, year or two. So I look at it as Amon-Ra St. Brown is a top 5 or 6 talent at the position. And if you get fed an incredible amount of volume and you have health, you can win Offensive Player of the Year. So I went with him over Hutchinson and Campbell.
I've got the Browns next. Okay.
All right.
And they cleaned up with these awards last year, even though they got dismantled by the Texans in the playoffs. Nick Chubb, Comeback Player of the Year, will be my pick. He is one of my favorites, even though it pains me to say that as a Browns hater. And I do think that he has the potential to be, and we're going to find out with how he recovers from this injury. Part of me thinks that he does have a little bit of that Adrian Peterson gene in him, and that he just might be built different, and he might just have the mutant body type where he suffers this catastrophic injury. We think his career is on borrowed time, and he comes back and he looks like a 1,300-yard rusher again. So, yeah, I'm a huge fan of his. I don't see Myles Garrett going back to back.
I know you're not a Garrett guy. I mean, I think Garrett for Defensive Player of the Year is probably the slightly safer pick, but this is what I was talking about when I was saying that MVP and Comeback Player of the Year are very AFC dominant this year. You've already gone through it with Rodgers and Burrow, but I think Chubb is an excellent candidate for it. And yeah, if he has a 1,300-yard double-digit touchdown season, that's obviously going to be in play, and people will talk about the brutality of the injury. There was really only one NFC guy that I even considered for Comeback Player of the Year. I'll get to that when we get to the NFC South. But Minnesota Vikings, I don't think J.J. McCarthy is there. Obviously, Justin Jefferson is always in play for Offensive Player of the Year. He's the best receiver in football. But similar to my Quinion Mitchell argument, pass rusher is the easiest way to compile stats as a defensive player, like the stats that matter. And so Dallas Turner for Defensive Rookie of the Year felt like the pick. If J.J. McCarthy has a great rookie season, I do think that Kevin O'Connell will get a lot of consideration for Coach of the Year. But so there's a lot of good options on the Vikings. It was one of the tougher ones for me to go through. But the thing that outweighed it was, again, like the lack of high profile options and the fact that, I don't think Jared Verse is going to have a massively productive sack season. So I think that Dallas Turner's a fairly safe bet to have most sacks for a defensive rookie. So I thought that was the right play in this spot.
Chargers for me are next. And it's got to be Jim Harbaugh for Coach of the Year.
Yep.
That's just a slam dunk. The personality in these awards too. I think people want to vote for him. I think they want to believe that the difference there is the coach who always picked stupid times and dumb times to go for it and lost the faith of his team with his game management skills. And here comes the former NFL head coach, NFL quarterback who goes to college and wins a national championship at his alma mater. And he's trying to make this franchise that always seems to have great quarterback play but can't get it done to put them over the top. Yeah, if they win 10 or 11 games this year, I think he's fully entrenched in that discussion and might end up winning it if he does that. Now, I have my Andy Reid thing as well, and I'm going to make that bet because you mocked me for it. But
Dude,
yeah, Jim Harbaugh.
I hope Andy Reid wins Coach of the Year. That would be awesome.
It's been long overdue, Danny.
I agree. I agree. It's like Belichick didn't win enough Coach of the Years. Popovich doesn't have enough Coach of the Years. Like I'm not saying he's not the best coach. Just it's not really how the award goes. I will go to the NFC West because, frankly, my NFC South ones are flimsy at best. I'll be honest.
You didn't have Spencer help you with the NFC South again? That's his bread and butter.
Yeah, Spencer.
He loves the NFC South.
Feel free to text me some good ideas for Tampa and Carolina. I really struggled with those teams. San Francisco 49ers.
Purdy. You doing it?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Because here's the argument for Purdy for MVP. Now, I don't think he's going to win, and I don't think he is that good of a player. To be clear, I am on the record with that consistently. I believe Purdy is a product of the system and Kyle Shanahan. And if you put Josh Allen in San Francisco, he would do everything that Purdy did and more. And if you put Brock Purdy in Buffalo, it would be an unmitigated disaster, and he would not have 44 combined touchdowns like Josh Allen last year. I am not a Purdy guy. But there is so much narrative hype around him at this point that we've talked about what happens if he's not in a perfect situation. Well, let's see what happens if Ayuk gets traded and if McCaffrey or Kittle gets hurt. And because Kyle Shanahan's amazing, because the team is really good overall, like if he still has a good year, like because last year was insane. Ayuk, Kittle, McCaffrey, and Debo all played 15 games or more. All four of those guys played 15 games or more. That is very unlikely to happen again. So assuming there are stretches of time where he doesn't have the best skill position group in the NFL, for sure, because if those four guys are healthy, that's the best skill position group in the NFL. Assuming it's less than perfect at times, and he is still good, if not great, it's weird to say it's a lifetime achievement award for a guy 3 years into the NFL, but I think it will actually feel like a lifetime achievement award, and it's a little bit more likely that he wins MVP than Christian McCaffrey gets another offensive player of the year. Like McCaffrey obviously is, I considered him. Bosa, I considered him. Shanahan's one of the best. Like there's a lot of options, but Purdy MVP was where I came out on.
I would have said McCaffrey MVP is how I would have done that he plays so well that they want to give him that award. A running back hasn't won one since Adrian Peterson, and they give it to him and they bypass Purdy because I think the narrative stuff works against Purdy with some people like you and me as well. Jacksonville, I'm going to go with the other Josh Allen for Defensive Player of the Year. I think he's one of those guys that's a little under the radar. And if the Jags were to if he were to have a dominant defensive year, as long as his PFF grades and his pressure win rates and those things were good enough, he could win it. Everybody knows who he is. You know, the other options on Jacksonville aren't great. I'm not saying Lawrence for MVP. I'm not saying Peterson for Coach of the Year. I'm not saying ETN for Offensive Player of the Year. Brian Thomas for Rookie of the Year was my next closest guy. So I'm going with Josh Allen for DPOY.
I like it. I think it's incredibly unlikely, too, that Brian Thomas is even in consideration for Offensive Rookie of the Year. Not because I don't think he's talented, just a lot of mouths to feed in that offense. Pretty hard. Like Neighbors or Marvin Harrison Jr. is one thing. Like they should be the number one receiver. It's pretty unlikely that he's going to be the number one receiver in that offense as a rookie. I think I didn't really think about Jacksonville because it was yours, but that's probably where I would have gone. We got to go a lot faster here.
Yep,
right?
Let's go.
Okay. No. We talked about it. I've got a 25-1 bet. Rams, Stafford, MVP. Only other thing I considered was Verse for Defensive Rookie of the Year. You've heard the logic already, but I went with Stafford because I have the bet.
Kelly Stafford has Stetson Bennett for Comeback Player of the Year in LA. Steelers, my Steelers. TJ Watt, what more can he do to win Defensive Player of the Year? He can't do anything more, and he got snubbed, so I'm not picking him. We've seen the best. They don't want to reward him for the best. I'm going completely off the board here. Peyton Wilson for Defensive Rookie of the Year. If he had 2 ACLs, he would have been, I think, either a late or early first round or a late first round, early second round pick. He flies for an inside linebacker. It is a counting stat. If he plays 17 games and comes close to leading the league in tackles, then I think he can win that award. You've said it's not there's not a dominant defensive rookie on the board. It's a wide open award. And I think he's going to play for the Steelers right off the bat next to Patrick Queen.
Seattle Seahawks, I struggled with this one, but I think new coach, youngest coach, if they overachieve and the defense gets back to being productive, Mike Macdonald, coach of the year, is the Seattle Seahawk most likely to win an award. I mean, I DK Metcalf for offensive player of the year, maybe. Geno's obviously not winning MVP. I thought about it, but like you said, it's not an award. But I thought about Kenneth Walker for a rushing title. But again, not an award. So I went Mike Macdonald, coach of the year.
We've talked about this next one, Colts. I'm just going to throw it out there. Anthony Richardson, MVP. There's a second-year quarterback that usually makes a jump, that explodes, that goes off. Just saying, among candidates for this job, for this award, there's not other guys. Like, I'm not going to bet Jonathan Taylor to win Offensive Player of the Year again. I thought he had after he got his money, looked like an average running back to me last season. So I'm just saying, be aware of this guy. In fantasy football, he should be the second or third quarterback selected, in my opinion. I really think he has the potential to be one of the great dual threat players in football. So Anthony Richardson, I don't know what his actual odds are, Danny, but I'm going to take a swing on him to win the MVP this year for certain.
Yeah, I mean, I like the pick. I would have considered Steichen for coach of the year just based on last year, but yeah, I think that I got no problem with the pick. Arizona, Marvin Harrison Jr. offensive rookie of the year. It's pretty obvious. If Daniels and Caleb struggle or miss a few games due to injury, and we've talked a little bit about Arizona as a surprise team and how good they were running the football when Kyler was healthy last year, that they were actually the most efficient running team in the NFL in the games that Kyler played. We'll now add in a guy that we think can be a top 10 wide receiver in the NFL pretty damn soon. That's all of a sudden a balanced offense. He could have a monster rookie season. 1,200 plus yards, I think, is on the table for him as a rookie. So I think that was the obvious choice for me.
Raiders, Max Crosby, defensive player of the year.
Yep.
I do think guys get to a point where if they're knocking on the door and they're close and they haven't done it before, they get a little nudge by the voters to say, hey, lifetime achievement. He's had numbers that would get him in the conversation in the past. Let's get him this award one time. And it's the uphill battle here is that the Raiders defense in general isn't very good. So that does, but if they end up being much better than advertised, two people are going to get credit for it. Antonio Pierce and Max Crosby. So he's probably one of the 10 best defensive players in the entire league. And it's slim pickings with the Raiders for these awards.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. All right, I'll go to the NFC South. My only option for comeback player of the year was Kirk Cousins. But I actually think Raheem Morris for coach of the year is more likely. So
I thought about Bijan for offensive player.
Yeah, I mean, I thought about him too. Like him saying they want to just get him the ball and get him the ball a lot. He's a spectacular player. Kirk for comeback player of the year will have a lot of narrative behind him. But the NFL loves Raheem Morris, man. And if they win that division running away with how long it took him to get a second shot at being a head coach and the embarrassment that happened there last year, and they just the narrative will be he brought stability to our organization. He brought professionalism to our organization. And we know he's beloved by players, so his players will be stumping for him. So I think Raheem Morris, coach of the year, I give him the slight edge over Kirk and Bijan. And I literally don't like any of my options for the other three teams in this division. So
Brian Callahan for the coach of the year with Tennessee. I'm telling you, look out for Mason Rudolph in there at quarterback at some point. And I don't think they'll win the division. That belongs to Houston. But I think it's possible they finish better than Jacksonville and Indianapolis. I think that every year we see a team that has a decent roster, a good roster, not a great roster, but like a 7-win roster, somehow win 10 games. There's a new coach. Usually there's a rookie head coach who makes the playoffs every year. So I thought about him and then Snead for Defensive Player of the Year coming over from Kansas City, but I'm going to ultimately go with Callahan, the young guy.
For New Orleans, I wanted to say first coach fired, but that's not an award. So I'm going to go with my guy, Alvin Kamara, for Offensive Player of the Year.
Oof.
I know. It feels like a pick from 4 years ago. And the odds of him staying healthy for a 17-game season are just, it's hard to imagine. But this is a pure eye test thing, man. We talked about it a lot on the pod last year. When he was healthy, he still looked awesome. He still looked like he had the burst. He still looked like he was a cheat code. He still looked like Christian McCaffrey to me. So I think there's a world where Alvin Kamara is healthy and has a crazy Marshall Faulk-esque, type of season where we talk about that him being one of the great dual threat players in the NFL. I think he's one of the best players in the NFL when healthy. I still do.
For Denver, I'm going to go with Sean Payton because you talk about having media friends. He has plenty. So he'll be my coach of the year with the Broncos. If he's somehow able to will one of those quarterbacks and make them into a more than competent starter, which I don't see happening, of course. But among the options on Denver, that's probably my favorite among a rotten group of candidates for awards is Sean Payton to work some kind of Sean Payton magic on a Stidham, a Wilson, or a Bo Nix and turn the Broncos into a contender.
So I think that there's only one option on Tampa Bay, and it's Antoine Winfield Jr. for Defensive Player of the Year.
Yeah, that's like my Kyle Hamilton pick, Danny.
Right. Well, and the thing is like he got the contract. So it's like, okay, now you got to live up to it. Well, he led the NFL in forced fumbles last year.
Yep, one of my favorite players.
With 6, and he also had 3 picks. So what if he leads the league in forced fumbles again with 6 and then doubled his interception total? Like if you force 6 fumbles and have 6 interceptions, you can absolutely be Defensive Player of the Year, especially when now everyone knows that the league regards you as the best safety in the NFL. Even if you like Hamilton over him, he got paid like it, So I think that there's no other player that you can pick at this point on Tampa. So that was the pretty obvious pick.
My last team is New England. Drake May, Offensive Rookie of the Year. Could he look like Justin Herbert this year? Not a rose among thorns. Herbert had great receivers to throw the ball to, but he just has these great physical tools and he's able to overcome the lack of weapons around him. And there's empathy there because he's trying to make all these crazy plays without much help. Sure. I also think it's on the board that he sits behind Jacoby Brissett for a portion of the season. But I don't think they're going to win enough games for Mayo to be the coach of the year. So Drake May when he gets a chance to play.
Okay. What would you say for Carolina?
Bryce Young MVP.
Okay, dude, that's what I wrote down.
Let's go.
That's what I wrote down.
Yep.
Because, okay, they had no high draft pick, so rookies of the year are out. They have no excellent skill position player, so Offensive Player of the Year and Defensive Player of the Year is out. Coach of the Year, maybe
Brooks Offensive Rookie.
No.
Why? Well, you're Caleb invested, but if the guy was like second, no love for Deontay Johnson here, Spencer. F off. No, like if Jonathan Brooks was second in the league in rushing or something like that, it's possible. But
yeah.
I like Bryce Young's more fun.
The logic is he was the number 1 pick in the draft.
Yes. I've used that even though I didn't like him out of college. I've brought that up here on this podcast several times.
I know. I'm saying I don't really believe it, but there is no other option on Carolina. So Bryce Young MVP. All right. Thank you to Spencer Ray. Great idea. Great producing. He's Andrew Fillipponi. I'm Danny Parkins. Subscribe, rate, review, tell a friend. That's who's most likely to win an award from each team in the NFL. First and pod. Peace.